What is going on, Babylonians? My name is Songs of Raids and welcome back to another video from Babylon. That's right, we're going to be looking at a melee build, something completely different, completely left field, something we haven't done before, something I've always wanted to do ever since I found out that there was a really good melee skill and there was two different types of melee attack that you could do. I was always curious if they would have some kind of mods in there to be able to make it better, make it a bit more easier to be able to kill enemies, and how it would work when it comes to those elites, especially when it comes to endgame. But I think I have come up with the perfect solution to be able to get you to do those gold CT15s as always, because let's be honest, if it can't do a gold CT15 on one of the standard expeditions, then what are you running it for? So what I'm going to do is going to show you can see the build in the background. I'm not going to touch on it too much, but I will talk about the main focus points of the build. The skill tree is pretty bog standard for if you've ever watched the Scorpion debuff kind of build, then it's going to be something along those lines. And then we'll talk about how I've managed to get it to work, how it works in practice, and what you should be focusing on when you're playing. So you've already seen in the gameplay in the background while I was doing the intro how I've currently got my setup going. Now, in terms of weaponry, you can actually do much better. If you really do want to be able to use Moaning Winds to be able to tie in with this for the fact of the melee, just to be able to, every 8 seconds you can activate your Moaning Winds because you're in that close proximity, then by all means. But I didn't want to show off Moaning Winds. I didn't want to use it in any of this gameplay. I just purely wanted to activate, well, the only mod that I ended up using was Radiation Splash, and even then I still kind of forgot about it because I was primarily trying to focus off the melee kind of side of things. But the reason why I went for Radiation Splash is because reloading causes a small explosion that inflicts vulnerable. I'm not too fussed about the damage. I don't necessarily care about Fortress apart from the fact that it will boost up my melee damage by itself. I'm primarily just trying to find another way to inflict vulnerable on enemies to be able to deal additional damage. So that's how I went with this. I do have a Death Shield that does have Moaning Winds on, but I did not use it. And yeah, that's pretty much when it comes to the weaponry. Feel free to experiment, feel free to use Moaning Winds if you do so choose to. And obviously, it can help you a lot when it comes to elites, that kind of side of things, but you don't necessarily need it for this build. You can actually get by without it as well. So as we go into the armor slots, we've gone for the Marshal set, and I went for a 5-piece on this. And the reason why is because some of the really good mods are tier 3, and we do need quite a lot of mods and a lot of changing in this kind of set to be able to make it as good as we can possibly make it to be. So I've gone for the Marshal's helmet, which comes with Anomaly Power, Cooldown Reduction, Skills Life Leech. Now, the main thing that you want out of that is Anomaly Power. Anomaly Power obviously feeds into your melee damage. For whatever reason, this game treats it as a skill. So therefore, any kind of mod that you find for your armor that activates on skill activation will work wonders in this. So gone for Anomaly Power just to be able to boost so we can get as much melee damage as physically possible. We've gone for Wide Horizons on our Endless Mass because the idea was that I wanted Endless Mass to draw all of them within a small crowd, and then I can just do a leap, do one of the charge attacks, and just inflict as much damage as possible. And then you'll see that come into the class tree as well, that actually feeds into more damage. So the more enemies you hit with your melee, the stronger your melee will end up being. On top of that, we've gone for Brawl, which boosts our melee skill damage by 100%. That's pretty much a given if you're going for any kind of melee build. So I'd highly recommend that you get that tier 2 mod somewhere on it. On top of that, we've then gone for the armor, where high intensity anomaly damage affected against affected targets for Endless Mass is increased by 33% for 5 seconds. Now, this is where the multipliers start coming into things. It's kind of nice to be able to pull so many enemies in. You want to go for things that multiply anomaly damage, because obviously melee is anomaly damage. So therefore, the more anomaly debuffs that you put on an enemy, the more damage you'll then be doing in your skill. On top of that, we've gone for Tainted Blood, where it increases the damage dealt to enemies afflicted with bleed by 25%. This is another multiplier. And the reason why we want this is our melee primarily deals bleed as soon as we hit an enemy with it. So if they do require a follow-up shot, the next one will hit them for even harder than the first one actually did. Going from there, we've gone for the Waistcloth, where boosts our power assimilation boosts our anomaly power by just over 11,000 for each elite that's present on the battlefield. This just kind of helps, where we're just giving you a nice little bump, just giving you a little bit more of extra damage. That one is kind of hit or miss, really. You don't necessarily need that one, but I found it was quite nice to be able to help deal a little bit more to elites, but that one's a bit up in the air. You potentially get away with something else on there. On top of that, we then go for martial arts, which reduces the cooldown of the melee skill by 50%. Obviously, this just brings it back a lot quicker, so why not cutting down in half? Might as well. They've gone for the gauntlets, which gives us double jump on the gravity leap, so the skill can be used twice before triggering the cooldown. You'll see why we've gone for that in a second, but we aren't primarily using it as a damage dealer. It can deal damage because of all the debuffs when it comes to anomaly and all the anomaly power we will be gaining, but you don't need it as a damage dealer, so just keep that in mind. And then we've gone for Unstoppable Force, where it increases our anomaly power by 50% of our resistance piercing. As standard, because of our skill tree, we'll be getting a nice 15% anomaly power fed straight into our build just from there, just like that, which is quite nice. But then when we do our melee attacks, which we will be doing and which we will be focusing on, that will increase our anomaly power even more, and we'll see that when we get into the skill tree. Last but not least, we've gone for the Marshal's footgear. This comes with Despair, and this is the main reason why we go for Gravity Leap, and that's because enemies hit within the damage radius of Gravity Leap will receive 1.5 times more anomaly power, anomaly damage for 5 seconds. And then lastly, I've gone for the mod of Untamed Power. Using skills deals an extra 37,000 damage to enemies within a 5 meter radius, and the damage is equal to 30% of our anomaly power. So the higher that our anomaly power gets, the more damage we will then be doing. And this triggers every single time we use one of our melee skills, but it also triggers off the other skills that we use as well. So whenever we land with Gravity Leap, it triggers then. Whenever we use Endless Mass, it will trigger around us, just to give us a little bit of breathing room maybe for any enemies that have charged past us and haven't been affected by the Endless Mass. And if I remember right, we've also gone for Golem, so that will also trigger there as well. But Golem isn't exactly one of those skills that obviously is used offensively, so that one's kind of like neither here or there really. So that's pretty much the mod build. That's and then we just kind of look into the skill tree. Now the main focuses of this skill tree is, one, we haven't gone for a capstone in Seismic Shifter because we are not using any of like the Earthquake or anything like that. We're not using any skill as a primary damage, so therefore there is literally no reason to be able to get that extra base damage. We've gone for Strong Arm of the Anomaly, so after using a class melee skill, increase our resistance piercing by 15% for each enemy hit for 10 seconds. We are primarily using our melee, so therefore every single time we hit someone, we're getting 15% resistance piercing, which obviously then affects the next melee for doing even more damage. But on top of that, because of the Unstoppable Force, we're getting an extra 7.5% boost to our anomaly power for every single enemy hit, and then that means we do even more damage. So you can see how we kind of like snowball. We find a big group of enemies, we pull them in with Endless Mass, and then we just absolutely stomp them to be able to get as many hits as possible from that first one to then boost up our anomaly power and all our resistance piercing. Obviously, Strong Arm of the Law doubles the damage of the class melee skill. That's just pretty much a standard. You kind of need that to be able to do a melee build. And then everything else is just primarily anything to do with anomaly power and a little bit of cooldown. But also, I believe we've gone for the Golem, where it also increases our anomaly power every time we activate that. Now, some of you might ask, why have we not gone for a mod skill that increases the duration of Golem or anything like that? And that's because every single time that we activate it, we only get it for so many seconds. Therefore, if we keep extending it, that just then affects how long our cooldown will be until we get it back, and then obviously that affects how many times we can activate that to get that nice boost in anomaly power. So while it is nice to have the defense constantly up because you are getting in the face of pretty much every single enemy, in the same respect you do want it to end so then it can cool down, so then you can then actually get your power back. So that's the reason why for that. But yeah, let's have a quick look into the gameplay as well. Now, I know what you're going to say to me, and that's the fact that why have I not got for Seismic Commander? And Seismic Commander, don't get me wrong, is an amazing set bonus because it gives you 50% damage to any enemy afflicted with bleed, and obviously your melee is dealing bleed, so that follow-up shot should hit even harder just to be able to take things down. Now, I did mess about with this a little bit, but because I don't have the anomaly damage debuffs that I'm getting with the Marshal set and all the tier 3 mods, I found that I was using all 10 of the mods when it came to the Marshal set, but when it came to the Seismic, I was using maybe 6 or 7 because you can't get rid of all the Impale, you can't get rid of all the Earthquake, so And I didn't want to show Impale or Earthquake off as a damage dealer. I wanted it to show as a setup, as more of a utility, and it just didn't really work. I was able to do this at the CT15 Coliseum as well, just to be able to show side by side how it kind of looks, but in essence, I ended up doing the silver. It wasn't doing as much damage. I definitely spent probably most of the time tackling either the brood mothers that spawn in or the crawlers when it came to that middle section. So I highly wouldn't recommend. I would probably stick with Marshal, and the reason why Marshal does so well is, like I've said, it does debuffs when it comes to Endless Mass, it gathers them all together, it also does debuffs when it comes to the Gravity Leap, and on top of that, it also has the set bonus where you deal so much extra damage as a group, and it spreads it out amongst as a group as well. So you can do a melee on an enemy that's in front of you, and you can inflict damage on enemies that are behind you, and then because you've got Untamed Power procking, you can essentially you just become a walking cannonball. And well, not cannonball set, obviously we're not talking that bad. In terms of the actual damage, it was, yeah, I was genuinely surprised as to how well it was done. And like the clip at the start, because that was done with the Marshal set, you can hit for over 2 million damage with a single melee hit, and that really blew my mind as to how useful, how good this can actually be. So I will say that this is no way competitive in terms of getting quick times. I didn't test this out in a co-op environment. You potentially could get away with it because of all the debuffs. You don't necessarily need a second person running melee only. It would be quite funny to be able to see a team of 3 do a CT15 in gold with just melee only, and maybe that's something we can organise with our own Discord, so make sure you click on the link that's down below in the description. But you're not going to guarantee yourself quick times. You're not, regardless of the class that you play as. Even Devastators, with the fact that they get so much extra damage from melee in the first place, even then I wasn't able to get a quick time, and that's because the melee just recharges so slowly the more you use it. So if I remember right, it kind of has like a stack, depending on how many times you activate your melee and which one you kind of do, it has a different recharge time. So if I remember right, the standard one in front of you does like an arc, it recharges in 1 second after the first use. If you do the running ground stomp instead, then that recharges in 2 seconds. But then each time that you use it consecutively, it gets longer and longer, and that's the main thing that really holds this back. If they got rid of that, I don't know why that's a thing in the first place, but if they took that restriction away, this potentially could get even quicker, and that would, you know, that would be a little change. It will be a little exciting. You know, it's a different way of playing, and I genuinely had a good time doing this. It was quite surprising as to how tanky the Devastator could be in these situations without Golem as well, and then on top of that, just being able to just smash, basically punch every single enemy that's in your way over. And I mean, tell you that, as a sight, punching a brood mother over when you only come up to their ankles is quite funny. So in the background, you're now going to start seeing the Seismic Commander run that I did, and the build is fairly similar. The skill tree was pretty much the same. It had maybe like 1 or 2 changes just because I wanted a little bit more cooldown instead, but primarily that's what it had. So in terms of the skills, I took out Gravity Leap and I changed it for Earthquake. Now, the reason why I did that is, one, because Seismic Commander specs into Earthquake regardless of how many mods you change, because some of the gloves or the helmet or whatever, so something's bound to have Earthquake on it at some point. So I thought, why not? Let's give it a go. Let's use Earthquake as the primer in essence, so I can actually deal that extra 50% damage straight away. So I used that. I used Golem to be able to obviously increase my anomaly power. I used Endless Mass to draw them all in. The idea was draw them all in with Endless Mass, hit them with an Earthquake, charge in, ground stomp, and then just start going ham on everything that's in front of me. And while that was a lot of fun, it just didn't really work in practice. I didn't get anywhere near the damage that I was hitting on the Marshal, and I think that's because I just wasn't getting all the debuffs that I was enjoying back on that kind of set. So I think the highest I may have seen at one point was like a 500k melee, which, don't get me wrong, is still respectable. It's more than enough to wipe out any of like the little boys in terms of like Perforos or anything like that. But when it comes to the elites, it's just not enough, and you will just basically be there just punching. It's it's almost like trying to knock down a house with your fist. You'll do it eventually, but you're going to be there a while. So I don't know. I wouldn't recommend it as Seismic Commander. Just stick with the standard anomaly builds that you've got for that kind of set. But yeah, if you want to mix it up, if you want to have a lot of fun, just do something a bit out there, then use the setting. Just save yourself a lot of trouble. I've done the testing for you. Use the Marshal. So this is basically the first entry into the Versus series that I was looking to be able to do at some point, but it is primarily a build at the heart of it, and this is a melee build, and I hope that some of you give this a go. If you're just starting to get a little bit bored with something like, as a Devastator, you're thinking, I wish I had something to be able to mix up the gameplay. I'd highly recommend that you go out there, give this a go, and just see how you fare, and see if you can get a better time than me. If you can do some footage and show me that you've got better, then I'll quite happily hold my hands up and say that your melee build is better than mine. But I had a lot of fun making this, so yeah. And I will cut, at the end of this, I will just cut most of the footage just to show the ending of Colosseum for the Seismic Commander build. That pretty much wraps up this video, so I hope you've enjoyed. I hope you learned something useful with ourselves. If you have, drop us a like, drop us a subscribe. It will genuinely mean the world to us, and it just encourages me to be able to make more videos like this, because this was a lot of fun, and I'm hoping that some people out in the community are looking for fun things to be able to do. If you have any questions about this build, or you think potentially there's a couple of things we could have changed, then by all means drop us a comment in the comment section down below, or head over to our Discord where we do regular giveaways and competitions and just mix it up and have a little bit of fun with it. But we also have a great bunch of people over there already speaking in the Discord, and it would be great to see some more people, some more faces, some more people, all that kind of good stuff. So if you want to head over there, and there's plenty of channels, feel free to drop me a question in there and I will always come back to you there. If not me, then Danwaz and Benzo will be there to be able to assist as well. And on that note, as always, keep yourself safe, keep yourself well, and I'll see you all on that next video.